poor girl helps an old man cross the street, unaware that he hides unimaginable wealth and power. The late afternoon sun hung heavy over the town, casting a golden haze that made the dust rising from the streets shimmer like tiny embers. Naomi Brown squinted against the sunlight, her deep brown skin glistening with sweat as she wiped her brow with the back of her hand. At 14, almost 15, she carried herself with a quiet resilience, though her clothes betrayed the hardships of her life. Her oversized, faded shirt hung loosely over her small frame, fraying slightly at the sleeves, and her patched skirt brushed her worn sandals with every step. In her hands she clutched a small woven basket, holding the few groceries she had managed to buy with the last coins her mother had handed her that morning. The main street was alive with the usual chaos. Cars honked impatiently as they weaved between one another. Vendors shouted over the noise, pushing roasted corn and fried treats toward passing pedestrians, and a pungent mix of dust, exhaust, and fried food lingered thick in the air. Naomi shifted her weight from foot to foot at the crosswalk, feeling the heat rise from the pavement, the soles of her sandals pressing against the coarse asphalt. Her chest rose and fell quickly, not from exertion, but from the constant awareness that one careless driver could change everything in a heartbeat. She glanced down the street, noticing how fast the cars moved, how little regard the drivers seemed to have for the pedestrians scuttling between them. Each honk and screech made her stomach tighten. She had crossed streets like this countless times before, but today there was something different, a flutter of unease that she couldn't quite place. Her eyes drifted to the corner and froze. There, leaning heavily on a cane, was an old man, his back curved with age, his shoulders slightly stooped, and his movements were slow and hesitant, as if every step required negotiation with gravity itself. His clothes were ordinary, nothing remarkable, an unassuming buttoned shirt tucked into plain trousers, scuffed shoes that had seen better days. Even his hat, a simple flat cap, seemed too worn for someone who might have once had pride in his appearance. Yet despite his fragile demeanor, there was something in the way his eyes scanned the street that made Naomi pause. The old man hesitated at the edge of the sidewalk, one hand gripping his cane, the other hovering in the air, as if testing whether the world would allow him to step forward safely. People streamed past him without a second thought, some jostling against his shoulder, others sneering or laughing quietly, whispering to each other as if mocking his slow, careful progress. Naomi's heart clenched. She could feel her own pulse thumping in response, a mixture of fear and empathy. The dusty heat pressed against her skin, the cries of vendors and the roar of engines filling her ears. But all of it faded into the background as she studied the old man. She noticed the subtle tremor in his hands, the hesitant lift of his foot as he tried to step onto the crosswalk. Her stomach tightened at the thought of him falling, of someone colliding with him, of him being ignored entirely by the bustling world around him. Despite the weight of her basket, the aching soles of her sandals, and the sun beating down mercilessly on her head, Naomi felt a firm resolve settle within her. A small bead of sweat slid down the side of her face, and she wiped it away once more, her gaze locked on the old man. She wasn't sure why, but something compelled her forward, a quiet insistence that she could not ignore. The traffic surged, a car horn blaring sharply, and she flinched, but she stepped closer to him anyway, keeping her basket balanced in one hand and extending the other gently, almost hesitantly. Her voice, barely audible over the noise, broke through her own nerves. "Sir, would you like some help crossing?" The old man looked at her, his eyes narrowing slightly, assessing, searching. His frail figure seemed almost swallowed by the bustling street, yet his gaze was unexpectedly sharp, alert. He didn't speak immediately, but there was a flicker of acknowledgement in his eyes, a hint that he had been waiting, perhaps silently hoping, for someone like Naomi to notice him. Naomi's heart thumped in her chest as she stood there, the sun warming her back, the noise of the street swelling around her. In that moment, time seemed to stretch. Cars slowed in her perception. The voices around her dulled, and all she could focus on was the old man, the slight tremor of his hands and the fragile way he balanced on the edge of the curb. The weight of her choice pressed upon her. Step forward and offer him her arm, or step back and let him face the chaos alone. With a deep breath that tasted of dust and determination, Naomi reached her hand toward him, her eyes locked on his, silently promising steadiness, compassion, and courage in the face of a world that too often passed people like him by. The street pulsed with life, a chaotic symphony of honking horns, shouts from vendors, and the whirring of passing bicycles. People moved with purpose, stepping over cracks in the pavement and sidestepping each other as they rushed toward their destinations. In the midst of this constant motion, the old man remained rooted at the corner, leaning on his cane, each movement slow and deliberate. His bent posture made him appear even smaller, and his trembling hands gripped the cane as though it were his only anchor to the world. Some pedestrians scowled as they brushed past him. "He's blocking the way," a man muttered, rolling his eyes as he pushed his cart through the crowd. A group of teenagers on bicycles laughed quietly at the old man's hesitant steps, whispering to one another, their sneers sharp and dismissive. The noise of the street seemed louder around him, as if mocking his fragility. Naomi watched, her stomach tightening. Every jolt of the passing traffic, every careless shove of a passerby, made her pulse quicken. She could almost feel the vibration of the asphalt through her worn sandals, and the heat of the afternoon sun pressed against her shoulders, but it all faded into the background compared to the sight before her. Naomi's chest constricted with a mixture of anxiety and empathy. Her basket of groceries weighed heavily in her hands, the contents shifting slightly as she adjusted her grip. She had to hurry. Her mother would be worried if she didn't return soon. Every second wasted could mean scolding, or worse, the fear that something had gone wrong. Yet her eyes lingered on the old man, tracing the slow rhythm of his steps, the uncertainty in his posture, the way he hesitated as though measuring the distance between himself and safety. Her heart ached, a quiet, insistent tug that refused to be ignored. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, glancing at the traffic that surged past. A car horn blared sharply, and a motorbike zipped dangerously close to the old man. Naomi flinched, a sharp pang of fear slicing through her chest. She could feel the heat of her own sweat trickling down her spine, the dust from the street clinging to her skin, and the rough texture of her basket pressing against her palm. Each sensory detail, the smell of fried snacks from a nearby stall, the rumble of engines under her feet, the sharp scent of exhaust, grounded her, yet also reminded her of the precariousness of the moment. Her internal struggle tightened like a knot. Should she mind her own business, step aside and continue her path home? Or should she risk slowing herself, entering a space of uncertainty, and offer assistance to this frail stranger? The crowd's indifference seemed to whisper at her conscience, "Ignore him. Focus on yourself. It's not your responsibility." Yet a quieter, stronger voice inside her pushed back. "You can't just walk by. Someone has to help him." Naomi's hands clenched briefly around the basket, knuckles whitening. She swallowed hard, tasting the metallic tang of adrenaline. Her eyes flicked to the old man again. He had paused, one foot hovering above the pavement, the cane trembling slightly under his weight. His gaze met hers, sharp and unreadable, a flicker of expectation hidden within the depths of tired eyes. There was no impatience, no pleading, only a quiet assessment, as if he were weighing the sincerity of whoever dared to approach him. Taking a deep, steadying breath, Naomi took a small step forward, then another, letting the weight of her decision settle into her movements. She extended her free hand gently toward him, careful not to startle him. "Sir," she said, her voice soft but clear over the hum of the street, "would you like me to help you cross?" The old man's eyes narrowed slightly, scrutinizing her face, her posture, the small gesture she had offered. For a moment, time seemed to pause. The roar of engines, the shouts of vendors, the whispering of bystanders all fading into an almost imperceptible hum. Then almost imperceptibly he nodded. The small motion carried with it a quiet dignity, a tacit acknowledgement that Naomi's presence had been noticed, that her courage had passed the unspoken test. A brief flutter of relief surged through Naomi's chest, her heart beating fast yet steady, her palms moist from nerves and anticipation. She adjusted her grip on the basket and stepped closer, ready to guide him carefully across the street. Around them the crowd continued moving, largely unaware. Yet Naomi's world had shifted in that instant. She had chosen compassion over convenience, bravery over hesitation, and in that choice, something quietly powerful had begun. Naomi shifted her weight carefully, planting one foot firmly on the uneven pavement before moving the other. She extended her hand toward the old man, and after a brief pause, he accepted it, his frail fingers curling around hers with a hesitant grip. Slowly, she took his arm, guiding him step by step toward the crosswalk, her movements deliberate and steady. The summer sun pressed down relentlessly, warming the asphalt beneath their feet and making the air shimmer in waves above the street. Each honk of impatient drivers and rev of engines created a tense rhythm, a percussion that echoed Naomi's racing heartbeat. The smell of exhaust mixed with the scent of roasted corn and fried street food, coating the air thickly. Dust kicked up by passing tires clung to her arms and neck, gritty and warm against her skin. Naomi's fingers tightened gently around the old man's arm, feeling the tremor that ran through him, the frailty of his body as he relied on her support. Her own pulse thrummed in time with the chaos around them, a reminder of how delicate the moment was. One wrong step, one distracted driver, and the crossing could turn dangerous in an instant. As they moved forward, a group of teenagers on bicycles pedaled past, their voices cutting through the noise. "Why waste time on him?" One sneered, his tone mocking and cruel. "He's just an old beggar." Another laughed, nudging his friend with the handlebar. Naomi felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks, but she didn't look away. Instead, she adjusted her hold, keeping the old man close and shielding him from the worst of the traffic. Her jaw tightened in quiet determination. The taunts slid off her like water, irrelevant compared to the fragile life she was helping protect. The old man shuffled cautiously, one foot in front of the other, occasionally pausing as if negotiating with gravity itself. Naomi felt the slight shake in his arm and spoke softly, her voice firm but calm. "You're doing fine. Just a little more." He glanced down at her, his eyes sharp despite the weathered lines of age etched into his face. "Why help me, child?" he asked quietly, almost in a whisper that was nearly drowned by the street's cacophony. "No one else does." Naomi met his gaze, her own eyes steady and full of resolve. "Because you need it," she replied, her voice soft but unwavering. "That's reason enough." For a brief moment, the two moved in quiet synchrony, their connection transcending the chaotic environment around them. Naomi's senses sharpened as she took in small, subtle details she hadn't noticed before. The cane he leaned on wasn't merely a simple support. The wood was finely carved, delicate patterns etched along its length that suggested craftsmanship far beyond what a frail old man, in need, would possess. His shoes, dusty from the walk, were clearly made of high-quality leather, the seams and polish peeking through the grime. Something about him didn't match the appearance of poverty his body suggested. Naomi's curiosity nudged at her, but she focused on the steps ahead, holding tighter as the street demanded every ounce of care. A horn blared sharply from a nearby car, and Naomi flinched slightly, pulling the old man closer to the curb. The heat of the sun made the asphalt almost unbearable underfoot, radiating warmth that seeped through her sandals, yet she pressed on, step by careful step. Around them, the city continued in motion, people rushing, vendors shouting, engines roaring, but Naomi felt a bubble of concentrated focus around them, as if the street noise softened whenever she held his arm. He paused briefly, his gaze shifting downward and then up to her face. "You've got a strong heart, child," he murmured, a faint smile flickering at the corner of his lips. "Most would have ignored me long ago." Naomi's lips twitched in a modest, shy smile. "I didn't," she said simply, though her heart pounded with both pride and exhaustion. She adjusted her grip again, feeling the subtle richness in his clothing and cane, pieces of a puzzle that didn't yet make sense. Something about him was hidden beneath the humble exterior, a story waiting to unfold. And as they continued across the bustling street, Naomi felt a strange sense of anticipation mingled with her determination. Each step brought them closer to safety, yes, but also closer to the revelation that the man she had helped might not be what he seemed. The tension of the crossing, the heat, the noise, the judgmental eyes, only heightened the sense that the world was about to surprise her in a way she could never have imagined. Naomi's heart was still pounding as she guided the old man to the far side of the street. Each step had felt precarious, a delicate dance against honking horns and impatient drivers. The sun blazed overhead, casting a warm glow on the pavement, and the scent of exhaust and roasted street food mingled with the dust rising around them. When both feet finally landed on the curb, Naomi exhaled a shaky breath, a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Her grip on his arm loosened slightly, and a shy, almost bashful smile tugged at the corners of her lips. For a brief moment, the chaotic city seemed to pause. Naomi's gaze met his, and she thought she saw a faint flicker of gratitude in his deep, sharp eyes. She began to step back, ready to continue toward home, when the sudden roar of an engine cut through the street noise. A sleek black luxury car glided smoothly to the curb, its polished surface gleaming in the late afternoon sun. The tires hissed softly as they met the asphalt, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. The old man's gaze shifted toward the car, and for the first time Naomi noticed a subtle straightening of his posture. The weight of age and fragility seemed to lift slightly as a man in a perfectly tailored dark suit leapt out of the car, his polished shoes clicking sharply against the pavement. He bowed deeply to the old man, his voice respectful and urgent. "Sir, your car is ready," he said, the words carrying both deference and familiarity. Naomi's eyes widened, and she instinctively took a small step back. A ripple of shock ran through the crowd, whispers spreading like wildfire. "Wait, sir?" "Who is he?" someone murmured, their voice a mix of astonishment and disbelief. That's Mr. Whitman," another gasped. The old man slowly removed his flat cap, revealing a mane of silver hair that caught the sun's rays. As he stood upright, his frailty seemed to vanish completely. His back straightened, his shoulders broadened, and there was an unmistakable authority in his bearing. The quiet dignity that Naomi had glimpsed earlier now radiated fully, demanding acknowledgement. His eyes, sharp and assessing, scanned the crowd, and Naomi could see why people deferred to him, not because of fear, but because of the weight of his presence, the kind of quiet command that only comes with power and wisdom accumulated over decades. Recognition rippled through the bystanders. The vendors who had shouted and gestured impatiently froze mid-motion, their hands clutching trays or baskets. The teenagers on bicycles, who had sneered and laughed moments before, suddenly lowered their heads, embarrassment washing over their faces. The murmurs grew louder as realization sank in. This was not just any old man. They were in the presence of Harold Whitman, the wealthiest businessman in town. Banks, factories, shops, every institution that powered the town bore his influence. And yet, here he had been, walking among them, blending in with ordinary humanity, frail and seemingly vulnerable. Naomi's cheeks flushed, a mixture of awe and disbelief. She glanced down at the old man's hands, noting again the subtle richness of his cane, the craftsmanship in its carved wood. The polished leather of his shoes gleamed now that the dust seemed irrelevant, a silent clue to the life he had led, a life she could never have imagined from his outward appearance. The man in the suit gestured toward the car, but Mr. Whitman's gaze lingered on Naomi. The corners of his mouth lifted in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. There was no condescension in it, only acknowledgement. He nodded slightly, a gesture of gratitude and recognition that spoke volumes without words. The crowd's attention shifted fully now, every whisper laden with respect and regret. Those who had mocked him earlier could do nothing but avert their eyes, feeling the weight of their assumptions crashing down around them. Naomi felt her heart swell with a quiet pride, the bravery and kindness she had shown now illuminated in the harsh light of revelation. She had acted without expectation, and yet the impact of her simple choice to help had echoed far beyond what she could have imagined. In that moment, the street felt suspended in a fragile balance between awe and shame, between ordinary life and extraordinary revelation. Naomi watched as Mr. Whitman stepped toward his luxury car, the crowd parting instinctively, and she realized that she had witnessed more than an act of kindness. She had glimpsed the truth that appearances could deceive, and that dignity and character often hide in plain sight. And as the car door closed behind him, the murmurs continued, but now tinged with respect. The frail old man they had ignored moments ago was, in truth, a man whose presence commanded admiration, a reminder that even the smallest act of compassion could reveal the most extraordinary truths. Naomi's fingers tightened around the handle of her small basket as she stood frozen on the curb, her heart still pounding from the sudden revelation. The sleek black car gleamed in the late afternoon sun, its polished surface reflecting the astonished faces of the crowd. Dust motes danced lazily in the warm light, but Naomi hardly noticed them. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the frail, ordinary old man she had helped with the commanding presence and undeniable wealth of Mr. Harold Whitman, the richest businessman in town. Around her, the bustling street seemed to hold its breath. Vendors froze mid-gesture, street noise dimmed, and even the hum of engines from passing cars seemed muted, as if the world itself paused to witness what was unfolding. Naomi's eyes darted from the crowd to Mr. Whitman, still standing with his back straight, hat removed, exuding a calm authority that silenced everyone around him. She felt a mixture of awe, embarrassment, and relief wash over her, a swirling tide of emotions she couldn't yet name. Mr. Whitman's gaze shifted toward her, his eyes softened, no longer the sharp, unreadable eyes she had glimpsed when they first met. He took a deliberate step closer, the polished shoes clicking softly against the curb, and raised his voice so that the surrounding crowd could hear clearly. "Out of everyone here," he said, his tone carrying warmth and gravitas, "only this young lady offered me her hand." His eyes lingered on Naomi, studying her earnest expression. "Remember, kindness costs nothing, but it reveals everything." The words hung in the air like a tangible presence. Naomi's lips parted slightly, unsure whether to speak as her cheeks flushed with heat, a mixture of pride, embarrassment, and disbelief. Around them, murmurs rippled through the crowd. The earlier jeers, the dismissive comments, the laughter at the old man's supposed helplessness. All of it fell silent. Heavy guilt pressed down on the bystanders, their faces pale under the revelation that they had misjudged both Naomi and the man she had helped. A few vendors lowered their heads, shuffling feet awkwardly, while the teenagers on bicycles exchanged uneasy glances. Naomi could feel their eyes on her, yet instead of mockery, there was now a flicker of admiration, tinged with shame. It was as if the entire street had been reminded of a simple, undeniable truth. The measure of a person is not in appearances, but in the actions they choose to take. Mr. Whitman's expression softened further, and he reached out a hand, this time not for support, but in genuine acknowledgement. "Young lady," he said, his voice carrying both authority and warmth, "what is your name?" Naomi swallowed, her throat tight, and managed to reply, her voice quiet but steady. Naomi Brown, sir." "Naomi Brown," he repeated, the name rolling off his tongue with careful respect. "Thank you, Naomi, truly. Your courage and kindness today are rare, and they will not be forgotten." His eyes scanned her face, noting the dust clinging to her hair, the sweat glistening on her brow, the worn sandals that carried her unwavering determination. Every detail of her humble appearance was acknowledged, yet nothing in him diminished the weight of her action. Naomi felt a lump rise in her throat. She had acted without expectation, without thought of recognition or reward, yet here she was, standing before one of the most influential men in the town, being seen, truly seen for the first time. A strange warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief, pride, and the quiet satisfaction of having done the right thing. The crowd shifted, whispers spreading as people processed the moment. She helped him. She actually helped him, one bystander murmured, disbelief still laced with admiration. Others nodded slowly, shame and respect mingling in equal measure. The teenagers who had taunted the old man earlier avoided her gaze, their earlier confidence replaced with introspection and humility. Mr. Whitman offered Naomi a small, genuine smile, a gesture that carried more weight than words. "Naomi," he said softly, "your kindness today proves something important. The world may often overlook what is right, but those who act with a good heart shine brightly, no matter the odds." Naomi's eyes glistened as she nodded, feeling the full magnitude of his words. For a few heartbeats, the street was silent except for the distant hum of engines and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Naomi clutched her basket tighter, inhaling the warm, dusty air, aware that she had just participated in a moment that would be remembered far longer than the afternoon heat. In that instant, she understood that small acts of courage, compassion, and kindness had the power to shift perceptions, awaken respect, and touch lives in ways she could never have imagined. The morning sun streamed through the narrow windows of Naomi's small home, casting warm, golden slivers of light across the faded curtains and the worn wooden floor. The aroma of brewing coffee mixed with the lingering scent of yesterday's bread, a comforting backdrop to the modest kitchen where Naomi's mother, Mrs. Brown, moved about with habitual efficiency. She hummed softly to herself, arranging utensils and wiping down the counter, when the mail slot clattered, announcing the arrival of the day's letters. Naomi, still clad in her simple dress from the previous day, hurried to retrieve the envelopes. Most were bills or advertisements, predictable and mundane, but one envelope caught her attention immediately. Its thick, creamy paper and elegant script were unlike anything she had seen before. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held it, tracing the familiar loops of handwriting. Harold Whitman. Her mother, noticing Naomi's sudden stillness, asked with a curious tilt of her head, "What is it, Naomi?" Naomi's lips parted, a mixture of disbelief and excitement catching in her throat. It's from Mr. Whitman, Mother," she whispered, barely daring to speak the words aloud. Her hands shook as she carefully opened the envelope, the crisp paper whispering against her fingers. Inside, a letter glimmered with promise and sincerity. The words leapt from the page. Naomi had been awarded a full scholarship to the town's prestigious academy, one that would allow her to pursue her education without the crushing burden of financial strain. Alongside it, a monthly allowance for her family ensured that her mother could breathe a little easier, that the little household that had struggled day after day could find moments of comfort and stability. Naomi's eyes widened, and she felt a tremor run through her body, shock mingled with gratitude, excitement tempered by humility. Her mother read the letter over Naomi's shoulder, her own eyes widening as the gravity of the gesture sank in. She reached out and clasped Naomi's hands tightly, her voice quivering with emotion. "Oh, Naomi, this is unbelievable. How did he—" Naomi shook her head, a small, shy smile playing on her lips. "I didn't do it for this," she murmured softly, her gaze drifting to the window, sunlight warming her face. "I helped him because it was right. That's all." In that moment, Naomi understood the depth of what had transpired the previous day. Mr. Whitman had not merely been testing her kindness, he had been observing the reactions of those around him, the humanity, or lack thereof, in the people who passed by without a second thought. He had witnessed the town's indifference, its judgment, its impatience. And then he had seen her. A small, quiet act of courage and compassion offered freely, without expectation. The lessons of that afternoon were crystallizing in Naomi's mind. She could feel the lingering heat of the street sun on her skin, the memory of dust under her sandals, and the slight tremor in the old man's hand as she had guided him. Each sensory memory reminded her that kindness was not measured by grandeur or reward, but by the willingness to act in the face of uncertainty and judgment. She thought of the whispers of the crowd, the jeers that had dissolved into silence, the shame on faces that had once sneered at a man they assumed to be weak. And she realized that her small gesture had ripple effects far beyond her understanding. It had reminded everyone who had witnessed it that true worth is not determined by outward appearances, by wealth or by status. It is measured in actions, in the courage to see another human being and respond with empathy and care. Naomi folded the letter carefully, her fingertips brushing the edges, and tucked it into her chest. Feeling its weight both physically and emotionally, she glanced at her mother, whose eyes shimmered with pride and hope, and whispered, "It's more than I could have imagined, Mother. More than I ever hoped for." Her mother nodded, pressing a hand to Naomi's shoulder. "No, Naomi, it's what you deserved. Your heart. It shines brighter than anyone realizes." And as Naomi looked out the window at the town below, the sun casting long shadows across the streets, she felt a profound sense of clarity. One small act of kindness, an ordinary choice to help someone in need, had changed her life. It had revealed the true character of those around her, illuminated the humanity that often went unnoticed, and reminded her, in a way that words alone could never capture, that true worth is never measured by wealth or appearance, but by the heart's ability to show kindness. For Naomi, the day had begun like any other, but it ended with a revelation that would shape her forever. A quiet triumph of compassion that spoke louder than riches, louder than pride, louder than the judgment of the world itself.